The air inside the committee chamber is thick enough to taste. Heated whispers, restless chairs, a rhythm of arrogance and restraint colliding under fluorescent lights. The Republican's voice cuts across the room, sharp, impatient, self-satisfied. Papers tremble in his wake, but then silence. Jasmine Crockett lifts her gaze, steady and unflinching. Her tone lands like a hammer wrapped in velvet. "Are you done interrupting me? Or should I wait till your ego's finished talking?" The words hang there, electric. A single heartbeat stretches into eternity. The cameras tilt forward as if pulled by gravity itself. A staffer clears his throat, embarrassed to exist in the same space. No one breathes. What began as another routine hearing has just transformed into something unforgettable, a collision between arrogance and composure. To understand how we got here, you need to see what pushed her to the edge. Hours earlier, the room had felt deceptively calm, wood-paneled walls, murmured greetings, the practiced rhythm of another long committee session. But beneath that surface, tension coiled like wire. The Republican member, familiar smirk louder than substance, was already at work. He interrupted witnesses with rehearsed disdain, corrected women mid-sentence, and laughed at his own jokes that no one else found funny. Jasmine Crockett sat, poised at the far end of the table, her pen motionless between her fingers. She'd seen this performance before, a man mistaking noise for authority. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. When her turn came, she began with poise, her tone steady, every word anchored in law and logic. But before her second sentence could land, he cut in. Again, then again. Each interruption chipped at the patience of everyone in the room, but she stayed still, eyes calm, voice even. Diplomacy had failed. Precision would not. She straightened her notes, exhaled, and prepared to speak in a way that couldn't be talked over. This wasn't about party lines or policy. It was about something far greater. Respect, dignity, truth. What happened next would leave the room and the entire internet absolutely stunned. Because when arrogance meets intellect, there's always a reckoning. He was the kind of lawmaker who mistook volume for vision, swagger for strength. Every hearing became his stage, every interruption a performance for the cameras. His name didn't matter as much as the pattern, loud, smug, and addicted to the sound of his own certainty. He spoke like someone who believed the microphone belonged to him by birthright. Old clips played in the collective memory of Washington watchers, him rolling his eyes as a scientist tried to explain climate data, smirking while a veteran described the cost of war, waving a dismissive hand as if facts were flies. He preached about respect for the institution, yet interrupted women so often it had become his calling card. He loved invoking law and order, though rules bent conveniently whenever they restrained him. To his followers, he was fearless. To those in the room, he was exhausting. He didn't argue to clarify. He argued to conquer. Each question wasn't meant to find truth, but to humiliate whoever dared to answer. His grin lingered too long after every interruption, his eyebrows arched like punctuation marks on arrogance. Cameras loved him. He loved them back. Attention, for him, was oxygen. That day, as he leaned forward in his chair, elbows wide, voice booming, everyone around him knew what was coming. Staffers exchanged glances, preparing for the spectacle. Even the stenographer's fingers hesitated on the keys. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett sat unmoved. Her smile was polite, but her eyes revealed the faintest flicker of exhaustion, the slow burn of a woman who'd seen this show too many times before. He cut her off once, twice, then a third time. Each interruption landed heavier, like a hand tapping the same bruise. She didn't flinch, but the tension had texture now, thick and audible. The aides behind her shifted uneasily, their glances saying what decorum would not. Here he goes again. To him, attention was victory. Whether people admired or despised him didn't matter. What mattered was the clip, his clip, circulating through the digital bloodstream by sunset. Every jeer, every interruption, every puffed-up declaration was crafted for the algorithm, not the argument. He thought he understood the game. He thought intimidation still worked. What he didn't understand was that Crockett had mastered a different kind of power, the quiet kind, the kind that waits for the right moment to let arrogance destroy itself. As his voice thundered through yet another interruption, her expression didn't change. Only her jaw tightened slightly, the faintest signal that patience was giving way to purpose. He laughed, unaware that he had just written his own downfall into the record. He had no idea that his next interruption would become the very moment his credibility shattered. But before we get to that takedown, you need to know who Jasmine Crockett really is, and why she never needed to raise her voice to command a room. Before the bright lights of Congress and the viral moments that would make her name trend worldwide, Jasmine Crockett came from somewhere quieter, a working-class Texas neighborhood where ambition had to wrestle with reality. Her childhood was not gilded, it was grounded. She grew up watching her parents stretch paychecks and still find ways to help others. From an early age, Jasmine learned that strength didn't always shout. Sometimes it simply endured. School was where she first understood the cost of being underestimated. Teachers would call her sharp but emotional, a label meant to soften her seriousness. She took that energy and turned it into fuel. Scholarships, late nights, second jobs. Nothing came easy, but everything was earned. By the time she entered law school, she had already learned the language of resilience. In the courtroom, her fire found form. She represented clients who couldn't afford legal protection. Protesters, single mothers, young men accused without evidence. She fought not for applause, but for fairness. Those early years taught her how power behaves when it thinks no one is watching, how it interrupts, how it intimidates, how it talks over voices it doesn't value. Every interruption she faced became a lesson in composure. She learned that patience wasn't passive, it was tactical. Her calm wasn't weakness, it was discipline honed by survival. In a system designed to silence, silence itself became her weapon. There's an image that lives in her mind. Her mother standing at the back of a crowded courthouse, hands clasped, eyes wet with pride. Years later, during her swearing in as a U.S. representative, that same look returned. No words, just the silent recognition of how far they'd come, from late bills and long shifts to history being made. For Jasmine, truth has never needed volume. It needs courage. She carries herself with the stillness of someone who's been underestimated too often to waste energy proving what she already knows. Every battle she fought in Texas courtrooms had prepared her for this day, this room, this man. The arrogance across the table didn't intimidate her. It reminded her of every case she'd won against someone who thought they were untouchable. Because when she finally speaks, it won't just be to defend herself, it will be to redefine what strength looks like. And when that moment came, the air itself seemed to tense. Everyone knew something was about to break. The tension in the chamber was electric, like a thunderstorm about to break. The Republican congressman leaned forward again, interrupting mid-sentence, his voice sharp, dismissive. He wanted a reaction. Anger, outrage, anything he could twist into a headline. But Jasmine Crockett had faced far worse than this. She paused, one slow, deliberate breath. Her gaze lifted, calm, unblinking, unafraid. A few aides exchanged glances, wide-eyed. A faint gasp rolled through the chamber, followed by a heavy silence, the kind that feels like gravity itself shifting. He tried to laugh it off, forcing a smirk, tossing a joke that landed flat. "Well, someone's sensitive today," he muttered, but his tone had changed, less confident now, more defensive. Crockett didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Her voice stayed steady, measured, and not loud but powerful enough to make the air vibrate. "Respect," she said quietly, "isn't optional, even here." The congressman tried again, louder this time, his words tumbling over themselves. He was unraveling, and she knew it. She let him talk, let his noise fill the silence until it turned against him. And then, just as the last word left his mouth, Jasmine leaned forward, not in anger, but in certainty. And then, she delivered the line that would echo across every timeline, every headline, every corner of the internet. "Say uwa, sir." The hearing room felt suspended in time. Every breath, every glance, every heartbeat frozen in that fragile silence before impact. The congressman shifted in his seat, still half smiling, thinking he had control of the moment. But Jasmine Crockett turned toward him and toward the cameras. Her expression was composed, steady, unreadable. When she spoke, her voice didn't rise. It cut through the air like a blade made of calm. If you spent less time interrupting women and more time reading the Constitution you claim to protect, maybe we'd all get somewhere. Silence, real silence, the kind that swallows sound and fills the lungs with shock. The congressman blinked. The smirk vanished. The color drained slightly from his face as the words sank in, not as an insult but as an undeniable truth. Around the room, chairs creaked softly. Papers shuffled. The microphones crackled. Somewhere a phone camera clicked on, capturing history as it unfolded. Whispers began and low, cautious disbelieving. A few smiles broke through the tension, subtle but unstoppable. Someone exhaled, almost in relief. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply continued, line by line, argument by argument, her tone steady and surgical. She cited precedent. She invoked the law. She pulled history into the present like a weapon made of reason. Every fact hit like a hammer. Every pause hit harder. Her cadence built like a slow, inevitable storm, not chaotic, but orchestrated. Each word landed with precision. Across the dais, even the allies of the Republican lawmaker began to shift uncomfortably, glancing down, avoiding eye contact. They knew what everyone else knew. The tide had turned. By the time she finished, there was nothing left for him to stand on. No talking point, no quip, no escape. He leaned back in his chair, lips pressed thin, eyes flicking toward the cameras as if realizing, too late, that this would follow him everywhere. And Crockett? She simply adjusted her notes, set her pen down, and looked ahead with the quiet poise of someone who never needed to shout to be heard. That, someone whispered from the back, was the moment dignity silenced ignorance, not with noise, but with truth. The room eventually emptied, but her words stayed, floating in the air like echoes that refused to fade. The lights dimmed, the microphones powered down, yet something in that space had shifted. Jasmine Crockett gathered her papers quietly, not with the swagger of victory, but the stillness of purpose. She didn't need applause. The truth had already spoken for her. As the narration softens, her reflection becomes a voice not just for the moment, but for everyone watching. They want you to believe dignity is weakness, but real power is knowing when silence speaks louder than rage. The camera lingers on her face, calm, resolute, untouchable. That's the lesson she leaves behind. Because in a world addicted to noise, composure is rebellion. In a culture obsessed with domination, restraint is strength. And when arrogance meets intellect, it is always intellect that endures. Viewers feel it, that quiet surge of recognition, that reminder that strength isn't in volume or outrage, but in mastery of one's own voice. In politics, in classrooms, in boardrooms, dignity will always outlast ignorance. The world doesn't need louder voices. It needs stronger ones. Crockett walks out, her silhouette framed by the glow of camera lights fading into silence. And as the cameras fade, one question remains. How many more Jasmines will it take before respect becomes the norm? The cameras stayed on her face. The faint hum of air conditioning filled the void where his voice used to be. The moment stretched. No one wanted to break it, because this wasn't just about one hearing or one exchange. It was about every woman who had ever been talked over, dismissed, interrupted, underestimated. It was about every courtroom, every protest, every conversation where truth had been buried beneath arrogance. And in that instant, Jasmine Crockett became more than a representative. She became a symbol. The clip would be replayed millions of times within hours. Hashtags would trend. Commentators would call it a masterclass in restraint and precision. But for those who were there, it was something deeper, a reckoning. But what happened next proved this wasn't just a viral moment. It was a movement. The cameras have stopped rolling, but the silence still holds. Jasmine Crockett gathers her papers, her movements slow, deliberate. Like someone closing a chapter she knows will be remembered. Around her, the room remains suspended between disbelief and awe. One woman, one sentence, and the echo of truth that refused to die. That's what remains when the noise fades. Not outrage, not spectacle, but the quiet certainty that dignity will always outshine disrespect. The image lingers, her calm face beneath the harsh committee lights, her resolve unbroken. A moment so small, yet it rippled across millions of screens, a reminder that courage doesn't need to shout to be heard. This wasn't just a takedown. It was a turning point, the kind that stirs something deeper inside those who've ever been talked over, dismissed, or underestimated. Moments like this remind us why we watch, to see arrogance humbled and courage rewarded. If you believe dignity should never be interrupted, share this story. Subscribe for more voices that refuse to be silenced. As the screen fades to black, a faint heartbeat echoes, steady, rising, the pulse of change.